David here with Figboot on Pens. One of the things I enjoy about having this channel is the opportunity to check out brand new products hitting the market. It's one of these products I have the opportunity to share with you today. What I have is a product which has been available in Japan, but is launching via a Kickstarter campaign here in the US. It is a unique dip pen called the Drillog, and unique is an appropriate description for the Drillog offerings. What I'm going to do today is go over the parts and features of the Drillog. I have 2 different nibs and 4 different holders to show you. I'm going to talk about what I care for and what I don't care for about it. I'll show some size comparisons and provide a writing sample. Thanks go out to the folks behind the Drillog campaign for providing the items you will see today for review. There had been pictures of this pen floating around the internet a ways back, and I was very intrigued. I was glad when the company reached out to see if I would like to get a closer look at their offerings, so I eagerly said yes. The company behind the product is called Shion and is based out of Honcho, Japan. They run a factory specializing in precision metal processing, developed through the manufacturer of aircraft parts. The company currently has 2 product brands. One is called Neighbor and Craftsman, which offers a number of metal-crafted home goods. And then they have the Drillog, which is a brand focusing on writing instruments. In order to get a closer look at this eye-catching pen, please join me over here at camera 2. Okay, there are a lot of options on this Kickstarter campaign, but what it boils down to is it is a nib unit which can be utilized with a number of different pen bodies. To begin with, let's take a look at the pen body options. First of all, we have something that is called the Classical Material AL, which is made from aluminum. It's available in 8 different colors. There is amber orange, emerald green, garnet red, lapis lazuli blue, peridot yellow green, platinum gray, rose quartz pink, and topaz yellow. Then we have the classical spiral, which is also made from aluminum. The distinguishing feature of this model are the 12 spiraling facets, and I do like that material. Next up is the classical Mirage. It is made from aluminum and features deep grooves, a little more shallow on the cap and deeper on the barrel. Then there is the classical SUS. Now, this pen is made from stainless steel, but the Japanese standard for designating grades of steel uses SUS, which stands for Steel Use Stainless. While there are potentially slight technical differences between stainless steel and steel use stainless, they are essentially the same thing. And finally, there is this model here, and this one is called the Twins Spiral. And I'll show you a little bit later why it is actually called the Twins. In regard to the weights of these bodies, this is the classical AL, comes in at 21.35 grams. Then we have the Spiral, which comes in at just a little bit under 36 grams. There is the Mirage, which comes in at 28.5 roughly. There is the SUS, which is the heaviest of all, which comes in at almost 63 grams. And finally, the Twins, which comes in just a little bit under 17 grams. Okay, let's get to the nibs. This is what the nib looks like. As the Drillog name implies, the nib does very much look like a drill bit. The nibs are stainless steel. A special plasma treatment is applied to the nib to add hydrophilic properties. Now, hydrophilic means that a material has an affinity for water. It spreads out over the surface and maximizes contact. A surface which repels water, causing droplets to form, is known as hydrophobic. Here's a look at the nib after it's been dipped in ink. You could see how the ink is held in the spiraling crevices. It definitely looks very cool. The nibs come in 2 different sizes. There is the 0.5 millimeter as well as the 0.8. I'll show you how both of these nibs write here in a bit, but you could see the difference in the line width here. If you're using a shimmering ink, it's recommended you use the thicker 0.8 millimeter nib. The nib very easily screws into one of the pen bodies. Let's go ahead and use it in the AL model, since that is the one with the most options for this campaign. Now, first off, you can tell here the size of the nib is laser engraved at the base. But for me, that's a little bit hard to see with the naked eye. It's rather hard to make out. With this reflective surface, I have to kind of angle it to catch it just right in order to make it out. It would have been nice if the engraving was a bit more prominent. Now, this is a very small pen. I don't have the largest of hands, and for me, it's very close to being too small to use comfortably. The cap does not post, and the edge rubs up against the inside of my hand. It's not sharp, but it's not the most comfortable either. Another thing, with the length of the nib, it forces me to grip the pen further back than I typically would on just about any other pen. For example, here is a Shown Design Ultim, which is a new offering from the company. You can see with the section here the distance between my grip and the tip of the nib. And you can see here that the nib extends about an additional ½ inch from where I would typically hold the pen or typically grip the pen. So it takes a little bit of getting used to. Also, with this pen being so short, my grip has a tendency to want to creep up onto the nib to get a little bit closer, which is not a good thing since this nib is going to be covered in ink. I just really wish that the body was about ½ inch or so longer to alleviate that issue. Next up, we have the SUS, which is essentially the same as the AL, but as you saw in the weights, it's significantly heavier than the AL. With a number of these units, I have experienced some cross-threading issues, so that's something that you'll want to be careful of when capping and uncapping these pens. Then we have the spiral. I will say that I love the looks of this particular model with the spirals. And I do feel the facets match very well between the cap and the barrel. And the seams are very nice there. On the end of the pen, it does say Drillog engraved on the end, as it does with all of the pens. They also have the name on the side of the barrel as well. It's on here and it's on the side of everything else as well. Again, this model does not post, and the edge is rather sharp against my hand. If you have smaller hands, then this might not be an issue, but the pens here just being slightly too small is a trend. Here is the Mirage, which, like the spiral, I feel looks really nice. This model does not post either. The grooves really provide a solid grip. Your grip is very much locked on here. It is not going anywhere. But again, we have the issue for me of the pen just being too small for me personally. Finally, we have the Twins Spiral. This model is a bit unique compared to the others. Both ends have logos and both ends are removable. This is so that you could load this pen up with both nibs. So you could put one nib on one side and you can go ahead and use it. And then you could actually use the one nib on the other side as well. Now, there's some positives and negatives to this. In regard to the positives, this is the only model which posts, so that when posted, this pen is plenty long enough for me to use comfortably. Also, the spiral grip really helps me lock in my grip in place, and it really prevents it from slipping onto the nib. As far as downsides, if you're using this pen with only one nib, then you really can't tell which side that it's under. And so also, I mentioned earlier, for me, the engraving is tough to see in order to discern one nib from the other. So when you take it off, it might be hard to tell whether or not it's the thinner or the thicker nib. Oh, and on this model, you can see that the Drillog logo is actually in between the slots here as well. Okay, let's go ahead and look at some size comparisons. Here is the AL, and then here is the SUS, and then here is the Spiral, and then this is the Twin, and this is the Mirage. And you could see that they are virtually all the same size. In regard to some other size comparisons, here it is with a Lamy All-Star and a Pilot Metropolitan. Here it is with a Karas Company ink version 2. And here it is with a Tactile Turn Gist and a Gravitas Entry. And then finally, another dip pen that I reviewed a while back when I reviewed glass pens, which is the Wancher Suzuku Mars. Now, this is interesting because it's not just a dip pen, it actually has a converter in here, and that then ink will draw into this glass nib pen. And that's what it looks like in comparison to the Drillog. Now let's see this unique nib in action. And in order to do so, let's use it with one of my favorite inks, which is Diamine Pumpkin. So let's go ahead and dip this in here. And you can see how the ink sticks to the grooves there. So we have the Drillog. And this particular one is the 0.5 millimeter. And I will say it's fairly sharp. And the ink here is the Diamine Pumpkin. This is what the ink looks like. It is one of my favorite oranges. Here's what it looks like in comparison to the Robert Oster Pen Addict Fire on Fire. It's a little bit more muted than that, as well as a little bit more muted than the Leonardo Oroncio Tarocco, which is another one of my favorite kind of vibrant oranges. Okay, let's go ahead and take this off. Now, normally you would just go ahead and dip this in some water and rinse it off, and it comes off real easy. Let's go ahead and put the 0.8 millimeter in here, and we'll go ahead and dip it in here and just get a little of the excess ink off. And here is the Drillog 0.8 millimeter. And again, this is Diamine Pumpkin. I'll say this 0.8 millimeter is significantly smoother, and it does lay down a significantly heavier line of ink as well. But I did find, again, my grip kind of slipping down onto the nib itself, which is not a good thing since that has ink on it. In regard to this 0.8, you're not going to get any line variation in here because it is a stiff and rigid nib, and the ink flow is decent on that particular one, and that you're not going to get much line variation. In regard to some fast writing, the feed keeps up just fine. Let's go ahead and try that with the 0.5. Let me just get the 0.5 on here and dip it again, and then we'll go ahead The nib kept up just fine, but as I mentioned previously, I find this 0.5 to be extremely sharp, to the point where at some points I feel like I'm almost damaging the paper. I'd almost be afraid to use this on some very thin Tomoe River paper because I think that it would literally just tear through the paper. But on this thicker 80-gram 80-gram Rhodia paper, it's fine, but it is just a bit on the sharp side. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but in order to clean this nib, you simply dip it in some water or run it under a faucet and it will clean right off. And then you just wipe it dry with a tissue. If deeper cleaning is needed, you could always use an ultrasonic cleaner. Now, the company states the spiral grooves on the side of this body hold a large amount of ink, and that with a single dip, they say you could fill an A4 sheet of paper. So let's go ahead and put that to the test. First up, let's go ahead and try the 0.8 millimeter model. And let me go ahead and speed this up. You can see here that this 0.8 millimeter only wrote 5 lines, and I had to kind of twist it around a little bit in order for, when it got to certain points, in order for the ink to continue to flow. But 4 lines or 5 lines isn't really a full page. Let's go ahead and test it with the 1.5 millimeter and see if that's any different. Now for this writing sample, I am using the opening lines from one of my favorite books. Bonus points if you can identify the book. Go ahead and leave your comments below with your guess. You can see here that it only filled up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7.5 lines. And so I don't necessarily feel it's correct if they make a contention that they could actually fill up an entire A4 piece of paper. Even if you went every other line, that's not going to come close to an entire sheet. I tested this with a number of different inks in order to see if there was a major difference, and there was not. Each time it pretty much stopped right after one of my favorite lines on this for opening page that says, "The little folds of disapproval and potato chip crumbs." Now there are 2 additional items available in this campaign. There is this metal pen rest, which can either set it here or you can set the pen here, and it looks very nice. It actually says Drillog here on it. Let me get the reflection right. And then there is also this item right here, which they are calling their color Puddle. It's a type of artist palette for when you're drawing with a number of different colors. It does come with this little eyedropper, and let's go ahead and fill this up. And I thought this was rather interesting. Let's go ahead and do a little test. So we'll go ahead and fill this up, and let's go ahead and put some ink in each of these little containers here, and then we'll do a little test. Let me go ahead and put some paper underneath this just in case it makes a mess. But typically you would put different colors in here, and then you'd be able to dip just the end of the pen in there in order to use a small amount of that particular ink. But take a look at this, with the significant surface tension that's created, you can hold this puddle at a 90-degree angle and the ink will not fall out. Even if you hold it upside down, I'm telling you, I'm holding it upside down right now, and the ink is not falling out of here. Now, if I shake it a little bit, then it is going to spill, but I just thought that that was pretty cool. Now, when you're done with the puddle, any leftover ink will just rinse right out. In regard to price, there are many different tiers to the Kickstarter project and many different combinations of barrels and nibs that you can purchase. The basic set has 1 nib unit and 1 aluminum body, and that is approximately $220. I'll put a link to the project in the notes below where you can check out all the tiers and pricing combinations. In the end, I feel this project has some promise, but for me personally, the length of each of these pens, other than the twin spiral, which can post, really hampers on how this system fits with my personal tastes. My main purpose for using a dip pen is when I create my ink swatches. I use them for creating the writing on the cards so that I don't need to ink up a pen just for a few words. So here we have the Drillog lineup. I'll rank these in regard to overall looks. You know what? Let me go ahead and kind of change the ranking. I'll start with the Twins Spiral. I'll say that is my my least favorite look. While it's the only one that has the appropriate length for me, it's my least favorite design. Then I'd say next up, is the SUS, mainly because it carries a lot of weight for a smaller pen. Then we have the AL right here, which is 3 times lighter than the SUS. And then I would rank the Mirage second, that I think it looks pretty cool. And then finally, my favorite of the bunch is the Spiral. It's very eye-catching. I really love the look. I just wish each of these were about a half an inch longer. Okay, I hope you enjoyed taking a closer look at this unique pen. I'll link to the Kickstarter campaign in the notes below. I believe it is open through the end of August. Until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.